plan.
I just got a different day.
So it says April.
It says September, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it says
Are we gonna be?
Only if you need somewhere to write. Yeah. What?
Kind of discussing that. So I think the intent of this
Yeah.
is the proposed plan, which has the hybrid vote option.
To vote on that.
We have to vote on that first,
Yes.
and then we can
Certainly
propose
that would
other
be-
things as needed.
Okay, that's fine. So then somebody would need to make a motion to approve that.
Are you gonna just clarify this as we go
Yeah,
live?
I think
Okay.
Okay.
we'll go live. I'll
You're
share that,
live,
but
we're
that's-
live.
We are live.
We're live.
Hi, everyone. So as we come back together, I will try to do better at speaking more loudly because people at home are having a hard time hearing me. But the item before us now that public session would be done would be any further deliberation of the committee, followed by the agenda item to receive and approve the proposed reopening plan, which has been shared as the hybrid model with the remote option, is the item that is before us right now.
And I have a question on that, just as you're saying this. The proposed model that we have is for an August 31st start, but the next agenda item, there's indication that we're going to be deciding whether or not we're even going to start in August. So I'm not sure if we can kind of go back and forth between the two agenda items or how we can handle that.
So I think that because both items are before the committee this evening, that you can, I believe you could operate off of the assumption that this particular item is about opening schools, and then the conversation about those timeframes in the district calendar as a separate item, but it would be speaking to whatever was decided in the previous agenda.
All right. Do we have a motion on the proposed plan?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You want the motion, or you just
Oh,
gonna run
yes,
with
you
it?
can speak it, yes.
Yeah. Make a motion that we approve the proposed reopening plan as presented by the superintendent for a hybrid, four-cohort framework.
Is there a second for that motion?
I would second.
Second by Ms. Hawkins. I'm blank on names, I apologize. Any discussion on this? Mr. Majoris-Collins.
Yes, thank you. So I want to start with a recognition that the folks who have put work into this plan deserve all the credit in the world for doing that. They're operating in a totally unprecedented situation. They're trying to make the best of circumstances where there are no good decisions or easy answers. And on top of all of that, Superintendent Langlis has only been on the job for the last little bit of this transition period. And so to some extent, he inherited a process that was, already underway. So I appreciate all the folks who have put work into this and tried to find a way to make this work. I am going to vote against this motion. I'm going to do that because I think that we can't bring students and staff back to school until we can tell them with a straight face and a clear conscience that returning to school does not pose a serious risk of contracting a deadly disease. And we can't do that right now. We have no idea whether students returning to in-person instruction would be susceptible to an infection. We have no model for how many students might get this, how many of them could get seriously ill, how many staff members could get seriously ill. I'm not prepared to vote for a plan that I feel runs the risk of ending up with a dead student or a dead staff member. And at the moment, that's where we're at. I think that, I don't know if anybody on this committee or anybody watching is a sports fan, but I'm been hoping all year that baseball's been able to get itself together, and they just started, and we're barely into the baseball season, and we see teams having to shut down, cancel games because there's outbreaks among people who have perhaps more access to preventative measures, to protection, and more money on the line to prevent those infections than almost anybody else in the world. And so, you know, if Major League Baseball, if college football, if you know, professional athletics can't find a way to do this safely and to prevent their athletes from contracting this disease, I don't see how our woefully underfunded public school system, both in Lewiston and frankly across the country, is going to be able to do that successfully. I think that there are a lot of people who see the allure of presenting parents with a choice. In some respect, this is a continuation of the buck passing that has started with the federal government, where they said, well, this decision's going to go with the states, and then the state said, well, the decision's going to go with the municipalities, local school districts, and now there's a desire to say, well, the decision should fall with individual parents. And there's a lot of merit to arguments around individual choices for families, but the problem with an infectious disease is that an irresponsible choice by an individual, a choice to say your symptoms aren't that bad, so you're going to go to school anyways because it's inconvenient for me to keep you home, that choice doesn't just impact that student or that family, it impacts their school, it impacts our entire community. And so even people who keep their children home out of an abundance of caution, out of a fear that a grandparent or another loved one could risk exposure to this virus, could nonetheless pick up the virus from community transmission caused by irresponsible choices to go to school. Our plan relies, I think, to a sort of farcical degree on families in our district making responsible choices about keeping students home. And anybody who has been in a school as a student or a teacher understands that there are plenty of students who go to school with illnesses that they really shouldn't be at school. That's how schools end up being petri dishes of flu and colds and other diseases under normal circumstances. But under normal circumstances, those diseases are relatively low stakes, and generally not a lot of people are dying from them, but this is different. And I don't see how we can send people back unless we can verify that they're healthy, unless we can verify that they're not going to pick up this disease from someone else in the building, and this plan doesn't do that. I understand also that some people have been inclined to make the argument that this is our new reality and we have to live with this, that there's no end in sight, and so we might as well just, you know, get over it and get on with it. But the reality is, if you look around the world, this isn't our new reality. Most other countries have successfully grappled with this disease, contained it, limited its spread, and are beginning to reopen. I think I saw today that New Zealand is now at 100 days without a single case of community transmission. So this is a doable prospect. It's far beyond the scope of the school committee in Lewiston or anybody in Lewiston to adjust our national approach to this issue, but it is a solvable problem. We do not have to wait for a vaccine, provided that our country does what many, many other countries around the world have done and takes this seriously, follows the public health advice, and really cracks down on the virus so that we can get things under control. It is also the case for folks who are worried about, you know, a vaccine and that not being an option, that you know, down the road, if a vaccine becomes available, we can and should make getting that vaccine a precondition of returning, because once again, we can't have schools open if we can't tell the people who are coming in person to attend them, and especially the people who are coming in person to work in them, that they have a safe environment to learn, a safe environment to work, and are not going to get a dangerous disease. I would like to make the committee aware that if this motion is unsuccessful, I intend to offer a motion to begin school with fully remote learning. I'm going to instruct the administration to identify students who are unable to receive any meaningful education remotely and to report back to the school committee with a specific number of those students and a plan to return them to in-person education safely. I think that we can provide a safe education for a small number of students who really need it. But the idea that we're going to be able to successfully contain the virus with 50% capacity at our schools is a fantasy. And I don't want any part in voting for a plan that could lead to someone losing their life. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Mr. Donovan?
I would like to echo a lot of what Kieran just said there. One of my ideas that I've been thinking of, just getting straight to it, was, I mean, we have 4 cohorts in our proposed plan right now. I would be in favor of just eliminating cohorts A and B. If children, if there's not a necessity, a stopping point, they won't be able to learn unless they're in person. I don't think they need to be in person. That's unnecessary risk. So I would be in full support of that, of just having everybody be remote learning and doing that study and finding out exactly who it is that needs to be here and getting them here safely. Because if we can spread out that smaller amount of cohort between all of our buildings, then we can bring them in safely. We can spread out our staff in an appropriate manner. We just don't have the space and the capacity to do all 4 of those cohorts. And that's again, Kieran touched on a lot of my same concerns, so I won't repeat myself.
Ms. Hawkins?
I know I seconded this motion. There's a couple reasons behind that. I don't know if anybody in this room is aware of how badly this has hit the Navajo Nation in the Southwest. We're all aware that something like 33% of their population, which was tiny to begin with, is now gone. But they've done something truly remarkable. They flattened their curve. Flattened. Not slowed it down, not lowered it, flattened it. By enforcing strict mask requirements, curfews, social distancing. These numbers we're seeing, this 40% jump that Mr. Tallarico alluded to, is a fact. And most of that jump is kids going back to school, not required to wear masks, not required to distance, or their distance being there but nobody enforcing. This can be done right. The Navajo proved it. The difference with the Navajo and most other people is that the people on that reservation in one way or another are all family. They actually care about each other to the point they will suffer to make sure they don't lose another elder. That's the difference here. If you don't like wearing a mask, it's time to say tough, deal with it. You don't like keeping a distance from other people? I'm sorry, I don't like 7 Zoom meetings a day. But it's better than me causing the possible death of another person because I'm too ignorant to keep a distance. Yes, I would dearly love to hug some people right now. I've lost family recently, and my father himself just got over COVID. This is not something to take lightly. This is not only 1% dies. That's 1% of the entire population. The U.S. is currently the country dealing with this the worst because we have failed up to this point. Now, I do want to see kids back in school because learning is important. But we need to make sure that when they do go back into those schools, there are guidelines, they are enforced, and if that means we sit down with our littlest kids and say, I know you want to hug your best friend, but hugging your best friend could hurt you. That may be a conversation we need to have. Nobody is going to get through this pandemic unscathed. I wish we could, but it's not going to happen. This is going to hurt everybody one way or another. Our job is to get through this with as little pain as possible. I watched that courageous young lady who, yes, she broke rules. She videotaped in her school without permission. But look at what happened to her school immediately after. There's a reason she did that. I'm glad they took back her suspension because she was doing what was right. She was calling out something that shouldn't have been happening. We're going to have to make some uncomfortable choices. We're going to have to tell those students that for whatever reason think they don't need to wear a mask. Unless you have a doctor saying you can't wear it, you need to have it on when you need to have it on. That's just the way it is. I know nobody likes being the bad guy, but sometimes you have to be. It's just that simple in my mind. I want us back in school, but I want to make sure we have the time to do the training and the preparation that's needed. And I think we're headed in that direction, but we need to make sure it happens. We need to make sure that the people that are in charge of their classrooms, of their schools, of their school buses understand the responsibility. I used to drive a school bus. If you think a school bus isn't a petri dish, you should have been cleaning my bus after school. I'm sorry, loogies are disgusting and boys can be dang gross. But young ladies and their makeup are a whole other story. So, yes, it's gonna suck. That's just the way it is. But it's gotta be done. And I'm gonna shut up now.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Butler.
So I got a question and a comment, and Karen, maybe you
Sorry to
can...
interrupt you, but can you just wear your mask appropriately, please, so we can lead by example?
I get breathing issues.
Okay.
Just so the public knows, I only have one lung, so it's very difficult for me to breathe through my nose. I'm covering my mouth, so. Anyways, question to Karen. What is the percentage of the students right now that are hooked up with the computers to be able to remote learn? How far did we get into that? And from that percentage, what degree of success do we have within a certain period of time of getting 100%?
So let me make sure I understand your question. Do you mean, do they have access to the internet or do they have access to a device?
Both.
Okay, so access to a device, I don't have an exact number. I think as I shared earlier, the middle school and high school, we're pretty close one-to-one, if not everybody one-to-one. Elementary school is where we need to fill in the gaps. So 5th and 6th grade students, we have enough for one-to-one. Below that is where we need to fill in those gaps and where we've placed the orders to do so. In terms of internet access, we still continue to collect that information. I mean, we've had some students who have moved, we have students who have moved in. We're still collecting that information. Building administrators are doing that. If I had to ballpark, looking at the spreadsheet probably a week and a half ago, I would say we probably have families that have internet access. That doesn't mean it is top-notch strength. I would say that 70% of our families have internet access. The rest of those families either we have not heard from, or they've asked for, or have indicated they do not. Which would be where we would then, when we deploy our devices, we would deploy those hotspots, which we did do some of that this summer with our summer school programming. We deployed the hotspots for students along with a device for them to access that.
So my comment is that I was leaning towards voting for this tonight, but just in the course of an hour, we've heard about staffing issues that are unresolved. We've heard about state issues that are unresolved. We've heard about timing issues that are unresolved. We've heard about transportation issues unresolved. We've heard about labor issues unresolved. And I can't help but feel, if we back this tonight, that we're taking a dive into a pool with 3 inches of water. I think that, I think we need to take a look at blending this and phasing in back to a full teaching model more. Let's get the timing down, the calendar down, let's get as much prep time possible. That's just what I'm viewing, and I mean, I've heard the parents that want their kids back. I mean, the thing that alarms me is I'm not even confident where our computer situation is not an issue. So, you know, so I just feel we're just not there. And if we were further along in the planning and we had more in place, I'd be voting for this, but not tonight.
Mr. Cook?
All right.
Oh, thank you. So just echoing a lot of sentiment that I've heard before us tonight. This is a hard one. It's an impossible decision between health and safety and regression of learning. The outcomes for students who are currently in their educational journey right now, whether it's pre-K through to graduating from our high school, even into the college level. You know, there are students who graduated med school who are now treating this disease and they finished their last 3 months online. So there's just some serious concerns here about achievement gaps, about how we're going to create productive members of society going forward when we don't have the luxury of having every person in this community be able to take the measures to keep themselves and the whole community safe. I have continuously voted for the public health option, and so I will not be lending a supportive vote to this motion tonight. But as we move forward into other considerations, I think one thing that we have to start talking about a little bit more carefully logistics-wise is what local entities are available to help educate our children and care for the children in our school system. I think, you know, we have so many nonprofit organizations here, and you know, they do a lot for LPS to start, but how can we partner with them more effectively as we move forward in this discussion? Thank you.
So again, a lot of information's come out. I've been researching this. This has actually kept me up at night one night because I just didn't know where I lied on the issue. I think it's been proven that some things have worked as far as public health care and pro sports. I had an opportunity to visit some of the schools last week and was actually thoroughly impressed by some of the discussions, some of the systems they were putting in place as far as transition goes, as far as eating lunch in the classroom, as far as thinking of just the little things. You know, one of the things is this does go forward tonight. The biggest thing, my whole thing is accountability. As I was asking the question with the mask protocol earlier. This is not a thing where we have 5,000 talk to say you need to wear your mask, you know, especially to a kid who knows better. It's one of these things that if you can't get on the ball, you know, what background you're from, whether you're from a single parent household, whatever, you're not going to put everyone at risk because you just can't follow simple directions by just putting on a mask. I think the district has gone through great lengths of getting some systems in place that hopefully will be, if there is a hybrid model, hopefully they'll be in place by the time the school, the hybrid model begins. I think we're along the lines where we're definitely on the right track. I think we're more than on the right track. I think we're doing better than some school systems are, not only in Maine, but across the country. So that's what my thoughts were.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's not perfect. We're not going to come up with the absolute right answer here. But I think there really are competing issues here. As Ron said, we've got unanswered questions across the board here. But they're unanswered about if we go totally virtual too. We don't have those answers either. So I think that, you know, we really need to think about, you know, we've talked for all this whole time that I've been on the board, and you know, just pretty brief time and obviously a challenging time. But we've talked about the social emotional condition of the students and of the community. And I think it's been challenged significantly through this crisis. If there's some step that the schools can make to try to get some sense of normalcy back for the kids and for the parents, then I think that it is, in my mind, it's really one of our charges. We've talked about it, and we've talked about it, and if we don't do something about trying to recreate some sort of social fabric, then I think we're not really doing the whole job. I can appreciate the risk for teachers. My daughter is a teacher in a high school here in the state of Maine. She has two of my dearest grandkids, and I don't want to see them affected by it either. But I also know that we can't crawl under a rock. Even if the vaccine comes out, we know there's going to be a percentage of people who will not take it. So, no different than what we have today with vaccines that most kids should have. We have people that won't do it. We can't solve those social ills and that type of irresponsible behavior by not going back to school. I really feel that this is an approach that can work. I value every teacher and every administrator and every janitor and every food service worker in the district. They've worked very hard to try to do what's right. And I think that this plan will at least give us an opportunity. But if we don't do the professional development now, I'm fully in support of the delay in starting school. But if we don't do the professional development now, hopefully we don't end up having to close up again and retreat. But if we do, we won't be prepared. In my mind, taking the time now, taking the next 3 weeks in August and maybe 2 or 3 weeks in September to get the faculty and the staff and everybody on board with a product that can work, it doesn't allow anybody to get wrapped into it. I think we have to do this. And I think we have to put out, by the 8th of September, we may be red. And we may not be able to go back. But we've got to have a plan. We've got to have something. And just saying, well, it's all just going to be virtual and it's, whether it's red, green, yellow, whatever it may be, we're not going to even try. I can't speak to that.
Ms. Whitlaw, would you like to speak?
Thank you. So I think asking this board to vote on something where we have no information, we do have information, but we know that we have X amount of teachers that are compromised or can't work, and then there's another 100 teachers that you guys have to reach out to. I kind of want to know a little bit more about that, because is that 100 teachers that you haven't talked to at all, or they've indicated there might be issues? What does that mean? Then we've got the facilities that we haven't done a complete assessment on, so we don't know we have the room. And then the technology. So no matter what we choose here, like Mr. Damon said, both ways is we might not have enough computers or all remote. So either way, nothing that we decide tonight is going to be equitable all around the board, like we try to be. To make a decision without the facts, just doesn't make sense to me. And I know that everybody's worked super hard. All the administrators, teachers, I mean, everybody has come together to try to put this plan together. I don't think that this plan, without the information, could we vote on this, vote for this plan in good conscience? I just don't see it. I feel very torn, and I wish that we had a little bit more data, I guess. That's really where I'm at. Thank you.
Member Whitlow, thank you for that, and I want to just say out loud that we echo that frustration, and then there's the horse cart type question of, we're not going to get that staff data point until we know what the plan is. We can't make a decision on the staff plan, or the plan per se, if we don't have the staff data point. We had parents who struggled to fill out the survey because they felt pressure, and I understand it and appreciate it, about a timeline. Why do I have to decide right now? And so we have about half a dozen data points that we really need to do this as well as we can. And I think the first step in that is everyone knowing, regardless of what is decided, everyone knowing what that thing is tonight, if at all possible. We have an active situation for sure. We know that we have to be fluid and dynamic, and all these factors and conditions could change. As these data points do come together, if we have a decision, it will push us potentially in another direction. And I trust that this committee and our community will inform that. If we don't make some decisions, we won't have a platform to gain the rest of those data points to make the next decision, which might be better than tonight's.
Did anyone have anything else before I say anything? No?
Sorry?
Did anyone have anything else to follow up with any of that? I think that there's still some unanswered questions, a lot of unanswered questions. But like Jake was just saying, I don't know that we're going to get those answers if we don't do something. I respect the fear of the unknown. What could happen to our students if they go back to school, even part-time? I think there's a lot of that we do know. What could happen to some students if we don't go back to school at all? We have a high percentage of students in our community that live in unsafe environments, live in poverty, already are struggling even in a normal environment, and those kids are not going to have any eyes on them if we are 100% remote. Those are the things that I am concerned about. I know that there's the possibility of a death of a student or a teacher if we all go back to school, full-time, part-time, but I know that there's a lot of risk to a certain percentage of children in our community if they don't have teachers or other professionals keeping an eye on them. And that's the risk that keeps nagging at me in the background, making this a really tough decision. And I think that's all I'll say for right now.
So I have a really quick question.
Yes.
Do we have another meeting before this proposed September 8th?
I don't know that September 8th is even proposed yet. I think that's the next discussion.
But would there be another one before then in our normal schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
If there's no further comments, I'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
No.
Ward 4,
No.
5,
No.
6,
No.
7,
No.
at large, yes, and Ms. Wright.
No.
Okay, it's 3 in favor, 6 opposed.
Okay. Do we have another motion? Mr. Majora's call.
I'd like to make a motion to, and this is infringing a little on the next agenda point, but I think it is relevant, to delay the start of the school year by at least 1 week, begin the school year with fully remote learning, and instruct the administration to identify students who are unable to receive any meaningful education remotely and report back to the school committee with a specific number of students and a plan to return them to in-person education safely.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Potman?
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment. I'd like clarity on those students that are most vulnerable. And I'd like, hopefully it's a friendly amendment,
Let's hear it.
to specify special education, special needs students, English language learners, alternative education, the homeless, and lastly, hopefully this stays friendly, those students that are part of families where there's a financial hardship if they're not able to come to school. I've been presented with several daycare bills of $300 to $700, and I certainly understand that there are families out there that if their child has to stay home, that this really sinks their ship. And I think if we take a look at the numbers and we can work those numbers with those 5 specific populations, I'd like to try that.
Let me tell you my thinking in keeping it vague and see if I can persuade you. I'm looking for a more detailed analysis from the administration of who the students are who can't get a meaningful education remotely. I think the groups that you just identified are going to be the groups where most of those students exist. In fact, perhaps all of those students exist. But not every student in all of those groups falls into the category of not being able to get a meaningful remote education. There are levels of need across the special ed community, across ELL, across students who are dealing with insecure housing and homelessness. So that's why I wanted to keep it vague, to ask the administration to evaluate our entire student population, see which students really are not in a position to be successful with remote learning, where they can't get a meaningful education from it, and come back to us with a deeper analysis of who those students are, what their obstacles are, and then a plan to allow them to return safely. So that's sort of where I'm trying to do is I think one of the things that this committee has said so far tonight is that we want more information. And that's what the third part of my motion is intended to provide it. So I think with that, I have to reject it on friendly grounds with respect.
I'd like to move my amendment for independent, as an independent amendment.
I don't know
Need a second.
You would need a second for the amendment to go forward. We would discuss the amendment.
my understanding is while there's an amendment on the table, to make a separate, there has to be a vote on the current amendment before a second amendment can be added.
There's
Point
only
of
one
order.
amendment on the table.
Okay, so his amendment is on the table for discussion, and he's trying to make
No,
So this is not an amendment.
mine,
This is a motion.
This is a main motion, given the defeat of the previous motion.
yes?
He would just need a second.
Someone
Mr.
needs a
Pop
second.
will be looking for a second.
Okay. Is there a second to Mr. Potman's amendment?
So can you just, because it got kind of convoluted, can you state exactly what you're looking for?
Basically, I specified the most vulnerable populations that administration needs to take a specific look at. And that would be the special needs students, the English language learners, the alternative education students, the homeless students, and the last group being those students that are part of families where there's a financial hardship if the student does not come to school, where it would incur significant financial damage to the family for them to have to figure out if both are working, what to do with the kid, with the expense incurred and so forth.
So So I got a question now. Can I make it a friendly amendment with his, or do I have to second something to add
We
on
need to
something?
deal with the motion on the
Yeah.
table, which is
Okay.
an amendment. So that has to gain a second or else it fails, and then you could suggest a friendly.
Okay.
Kieran put the motion, Ryan seconded
No,
it.
but yes, did you have your?
So I want to ask a question of Mr. Poppin, but I'm not sure if that's allowed while we're waiting for a second.
It would not,
No,
discussion would not happen.
Seconds
until the
before there's a
second is on the
discussion.
Is there a second?
Is there a second to Ron's motion?
Second.
Okay, now we can have discussion, Mr. Majerus comments.
So I guess my clarifying question on your amendment is whether it would instruct the administration that all students in those categories constituted students who were unable to receive any meaningful education remotely, or if those were the populations we were instructing the administration to take a close look at to identify subsets who were unable to receive a meaningful education remotely.
Take a look at those populations to identify the subsets.
In that case, I think I can live with that being a friendly amendment. I don't know if I'm allowed to retroactively do that, but
No.
that's fine. Okay, then I'm going to vote for Mr.
We
Poppin's
should
amendment.
continue with procedure now that there's a motion, unless he wants to withdraw and make it as a friendly.
You ready to hold us down?
So, Mr. Poppin, you could withdraw your motion and then
Or
say you're friendly
It
again.
being voted down.
Okay, I'll withdraw my amendment.
That seems wise.
And you have to also
And now you
make
have
your
to
second.
ask him for it.
And then
What I need to do.
request a friendly
And
amendment.
given clarification, I'm okay with a friendly amendment. And Mr. Donovan was the second.
Also-
Okay.
You just have to remove your second.
All right,
Room my second, I just want to see if we can get an amendment in.
we're good. Mr. Donovan and I, and Mr. Poppin are all in agreement on the friendly amendment.
So just to recap, I want to make sure I have this accurate. So the motion on the table is currently to delay by 1 week, and the only
At least 1 week.
At least 1 week, okay. I only had a question on that from a procedural perspective, as the calendar at the start of the year is not on this agenda item, but is the next agenda item.
Yeah, if I could answer clarifying. I expect us to hash out the exact amount of time on the next agenda item, hence my instruction that it be at least 1 week. But I do think that as a part of a broader reopening strategy, it is important to at least ensure that we give a little bit more time. But I am amenable to considerably more time, but that's the next discussion.
Okay. So delay by at least 1 week, begin school remote, and identify those in, I don't have this language accurate, I don't believe, but identify those in the highest need to return to school because they can't get meaningful remote education, with a friendly amendment to include homeless students, financially challenged, English language learners, alternative education, special needs students. Did I miss any of those?
I don't think that you did. I just want to be super clear on the language of the third point.
Yep.
That we would be instructing the administration to identify students who are unable to receive any meaningful education remotely. And then obviously asking you to report back to the school committee with a specific number of those students and a plan to return them to in-person education safely, with obviously a focus on the groups that Mr. Poffin identified.
Anyone else have a comment?
So what's the date theoretically we're looking at?
See if we can take 15.
I think Mr.
1 minute, Tanya, sorry.
The next school committee meeting is scheduled currently for the 24th of August, which is tentatively proposed in the calendar as the first day for teacher professional development workshop planning.
Point of clarification, Mr. Physick, was your question about the next school committee meeting or about when the at least 1 week delay would start school?
The 1 way to week start school, and also too, do I need to make a separate motion, or can I add on, or can I propose something to Member Majerus Collins's?
You can propose a friendly amendment.
Okay. First, I need to know when we say 1 week to school, what are we talking? Just so I can.
I think we're going to decide that in the next agenda item. That's why he's saying at least 1 week.
Okay.
So it's sort of
It's
open-ended.
basically a placeholder, just to make sure that under no circumstances it's less than a week.
All right, so my amendment would be after, I'm just assuming this is going to begin in September, so my amendment would be at the end of September. If all goes well, we have kids in school, that there's no issues, that we go to the hybrid model. But once we get all the information from mass protocols and the facilities stuff going on.
So I'm going to reject that as a friendly amendment. I would say that this school committee always has the right to reconsider our model, reconsider how we're doing education, and I would hope and perhaps even be open to an amendment that said that every 2 weeks, every month, that we reevaluated. But I'm not willing to accept a friendly amendment with a trigger to return to, or to default to the hybrid model.
If you would instead like to make a motion,
I would.
Second.
I'm all moving way too fast to keep track of.
All right.
You got it? Okay. So now we have a discussion on, if we have a motion that we haven't voted on, we can have a second
to deal
motion.
with the amendment
Just one
first.
second.
So what was could you state the amendment again?
So the amendment, the initial amendment was that once we had gotten, the kids that got identified that needed to be in school, and we put them in school, and it's been a certain amount of time, and we've gotten all the information that we needed as far as facilities goes, some of the other protocols are put in place, that we would go ahead and go to the hybrid model. Remember, Majoris Collins rejected the amendment, and I made the motion.
So that's what's for discussion on the floor
Yes.
now.
But can we have a discussion on a motion while there's still a?
It's an
It's an
amendment to my
amendment.
motion.
So this is kind of a part 4, if you will. So the friendly amendment, and I don't have all this language accurate, but,
Whole previous amendment was friendly.
oh, sorry, a motion. Hold on. The independent amendment to review the data available at the end of, I think you said September?
Yes, so it would be more, so it's all depending on when we need kids to get in school, but a reasonable amount of time to assess that having kids in school is, we've been relatively healthy free. We've gotten more information about the facilities as far as the mask protocols and other protocols put in place, that we would move to the hybrid model.
And Putnam seconded that.
Yep.
Mr. Donovan?
I just want to put in my 2 cents. I kind of agree with what Kieran said. We do have the opportunity to reevaluate it at any time. We do have the opportunity to reevaluate this amendment at any time, but I don't know why we should put a solid date on it. Maybe just, at the end of September. Were you saying we absolutely switch, or are you saying we evaluate the data at that point in time? Because I don't feel comfortable saying absolutely that the end of September, we're absolutely going back no matter what.
So if we actually got so basically to evaluate, so we evaluate in the middle of September, and we would put in action to the end of September.
Thank you for clarifying.
Mr. Majoris Collins?
So to clarify a question from Mr. Physick on his amendment, and that is, under the terms of your amendment, would a proactive vote of the school committee be required to return to hybrid learning, or would, in the absence of action, we return to hybrid learning at a specified date?
So say that again.
Basically,
Yep.
do we need to vote? Or is this, what, are you suggesting that at a certain point, say, mid-September, we reevaluate and take a vote as to whether or not we want to continue with remote or go to hybrid? Or are you saying that in the absence of any action at the end of September, we would automatically go to hybrid?
So actually, but that's a better suggestion.
The first one?
Actually, no, the second one, but.
Well, I mean, it's a clarifying question on your amendment. Is that what are you saying that it's an
So I
automatic?
wanted to make sure that it actually got evaluated in the
Okay.
middle of September, because again, we're gonna have kids theoretically in school by then, and maybe
Right.
we'll have a better gauge of what's going on.
Sure.
So again, Mr. Donovan, right? Okay. Mr. Donovan had said that he wouldn't feel uncomfortable at this time saying, without a doubt, saying that we got the data without a doubt voting. And I can understand, I can appreciate that. So my thing is if we evaluate right in the middle that we have systems in place, which currently they're still in limbo a little bit.
Right.
We can evaluate from there to go on to put in the hybrid model.
So, I guess my question is, in the absence of an affirmative vote to switch to the hybrid model, does your amendment instruct the school system to automatically switch to the hybrid model? Or under your amendment, are we being instructed to reevaluate at a specific time and take an affirmative vote?
Well, let's just say this. Let's just say that we get in the middle and there's been no issues. I'll propose that the school system can switch over to the hybrid model without a vote.
Without a vote from the school?
I would like to point out that the original plan that we voted down had a safety mechanism in place for the children who are covered in this category of disadvantaged. And we also have another agenda item where we could have chosen to delay the start of the school year until some point in September, which is essentially what we're all discussing right now. And we voted down a model that did exactly what we're discussing with all of these proposals and amendments. I just want to point that out. We're rebuilding what we just voted down a few minutes ago.
So my position would be that I'm opposed to an automatic trigger of hybrid learning. I don't think it's safe to begin hybrid learning now, and that is going to remain my position until significant new evidence is presented, and I would need an affirmative vote to be supportive of the switch, if that makes sense. So I'm going to vote against your amendment.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, so I have no idea what's on the table. So if I can get a clarification, are we talking about Ron's friendly amendment? How many amendments do we go through before we can actually start discussing?
I don't know that there's a limit, but I can tell you where I think we're at. And so I think where we're at right now is there has been a motion to delay by at least 1 week, begin the school year remote, and instructing admin to identify those in the highest need to return to school because they can't get meaningful remote education, with an amendment to include homeless students, financially challenged, ELL, alternative education, and special needs students. With an additional amendment to review with the data available is, I've heard some mixed times, but end of September to move to to review with data available at the end of September to assess kids' health, mass protocols, and facilities data to move to the hybrid model.
Okay, so I would really want everybody to think twice about voting for anything that identifies class, race, anything like that for their financial, I think you just get that right out of the wording. I think what Kieran Mr. Juris Collins said, says the same thing without pinpointing specific people. That's really what I have to take on that.
Yes? Okay.
I have a point of clarification for Ms. Whitlow. I am willing to accept a friendly amendment from you that removes the language of Mr. Poppins' friendly amendment. I'll vote for it either way. So
Point of order, it's not a friendly amendment from Mr. Poppins, it was an independent amendment that was seconded.
No, it was then.
Mr. Poppins was a friendly
We
Roll with it.
Withdrawn.
Another state.
No, you're good. There's a lot of parliamentary procedures floating around.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Just a statement from me. As I look at this list, whether it's included or excluded or insinuated in our instructions for next steps, this would identify well larger a population of students to be in our building to serve than either group A or B. Anecdotally.
So, a point of clarification on that. That was actually my question of Mr. Poffin that made this acceptable to me as a friendly amendment, is that it would not be inclusive of every student in all of those groups. That Mr. Poffin, in essence, would be instructing the administration to focus particular attention on identifying students in those groups, but that not necessarily, in reality, virtually certainly, not every student within those groups would fall into the category of unable to receive any meaningful remote education.
I don't understand how we can responsibly, not we, us, the teachers, administration, anyone can responsibly determine if this student has an economic hardship, or if that student has an economic hardship, or if this student needs a different kind of learning than their sibling, or I don't think that is, and that's going to delay everything while they try to figure out a mechanism in order to determine all of that.
A point of clarification on that would be that the process I had envisioned was largely in accordance with the identification of cohort D under the initial plan. Basically, my understanding of cohort D was that there were students who were unable to receive a meaningful education remotely. So under the original plan, you already had a mechanism to identify those students. And that was just something that I wanted to carry across because I did think that there was value in the cohort D aspect of the original plan. Mr. Poplin's identified groups are the groups that are likeliest to include those students. And I can take or leave their presence in the motion because I don't think that it changes it materially.
Just a point of order, we should be discussing the amendment on the floor, not the original motion.
So-
Mr. Donovan, did you still have something? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So the amendment on the floor is to review data end of September to assess the kids and health of students who are attending, mass protocols and facilities data points to move to the hybrid model. So more discussion, or is that a vote at this point?
Can I
Discussion.
just throw another monkey in the wrench? Can I add something as regards as athletics goes? Is that doable or no?
I would tread carefully since we're talking about return to instruction. Is the motion on the floor? You can, but
Okay, do I need to make a whole separate motion then?
No, if
After this, after all
If
this is
Mr.
over?
Poffin, who seconded your
Academics don't-
amendment, agreed.
Athletics don't directly pertain to returning to school.
Okay,
And I would, just for conversation, it's not on the agenda, so I don't think public has had fair input to that.
so. Sorry.
Move the motion.
Sorry.
Sure.
Ms. Ray.
In terms of discussing this amendment, I get what you're trying to get at, Member Physic, but I don't think I will be supporting this because I think we should be evaluating throughout the process and receiving data throughout the process. In my thought of us going remote, I'm basically thinking about when we return back to the hybrid model, that's adding in cohorts A and B to what we've already identified as remote only in cohort D in this iteration. I hope we can do that on a continuously evaluative way rather than putting a date to it. So I will be rejecting your motion when it comes to my vote.
Mr. Majerus-Collins.
I would echo Ms. Ray's concerns, and I also want to emphasize again that after clarification from Mr. Physic, accepting this amendment would commit the school committee to a future adoption of a hybrid model without a vote. And I think that regardless of how you feel about what we should be doing, any decision about how we go back to school and changing how we're doing school during the school year should require an affirmative vote from the school committee, and that's why I will be, in addition to Ms. Ray's concerns, that is why I will be voting against the amendment.
I'm sorry,
Move the amendment to a vote.
Ward 1,
No.
Ward 2,
Yes.
3,
No,
4?
I'm not sure what I'm voting on.
Currently you're voting on the amendment to review the data in September to return to the hybrid model. Once we have data points, we can assess the kids, the health, and mass protocols and facilities.
No.
5,
No.
6,
Yes?
7?
No.
No. Ms. Ray?
No.
Motion fails 7-2. Sorry, 2-7.
So now we're going to Ron's.
Ron's has been accepted already under.
So we don't have to vote on that
So it is to
separately?
the main
Oh,
motion.
no, we still have to vote on it.
I think so.
However, is my acceptance of the amendment able to be withdrawn? After
you
our
could offer another amendment.
The amendment would be to strike that because of concerns of identifying and protecting class, and I think we should keep it as vague as possible. I didn't think of that before I accepted it.
And if it's,
Second that amendment.
if it's a friendly amendment, you and I can agree on it.
That's
And I'm equally willing to vote for this motion with or without it, and I will, again,
He's
accept.
removing his
friendly.
second from Ron's
Okay.
amendment.
So basically, now we're back down to the original motion.
Yes.
And Member Poppins still has the right to make an amendment, go through the process of obtaining a second and a discussion and a vote on his amendment. He still retains that right.
No?
Okay, thank you.
So if he chooses to withdraw, does the person who seconded have to also withdraw?
The person who seconded withdrew it. He withdrew his
So you've
second.
both withdrawn.
Clarification on that. Mr. Poppin offered a friendly amendment. Myself and Mr. Donovan agreed to it. Then subsequently, after the discussion and vote on Mr. Physick's amendment, Mr. Donovan offered a friendly amendment that would strip the language from Mr. Poppin's original friendly amendment. The only other person who was required to approve that friendly amendment was me, as I made the original motion and Mr. Donovan seconded it. I approved it, so Mr. Donovan's amendment was the second friendly amendment to my motion, but in effect restores it to the original status.
Okay, so that would be a withdrawal, not stripping language, because when we strip language from a prior proposal, it would require a second,
No, it's
from a procedural perspective.
a friendly amendment. So the friendly
And now it's
amendment is to
going to be seconded.
strike the previously agreed upon language.
Which would require a second, wouldn't it?
Ron, are you revoking your
I'll just
friendly amendment?
revoke. Make
Withdraw,
life
if
easy
you
for
withdraw,
everybody.
no, but because it was a friendly, we need a second, or you would have to agree to it. But it had a
But I
second-
did agree to it.
But it had a second prior.
It's
Ron
very
has
messy, but
the
it's
second
not
vote
the
free.
grounds. Member Poppins is willing to
I just want the notes.
Yeah,
weigh on
that's,
this.
All right, so would it be appropriate that the notes reflect that Ron's amendment has been withdrawn?
Yes.
So now we're back to voting on Kieran's motion. Ms. Ray?
While I am supportive of the intent and will likely vote to pass this motion, I think it does go a step too far in its scope and reach currently. But I don't have a better idea.
Anyone else? Mr. Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Ray, what do you mean by your last comment about it overreaching or whatever the comment was?
Went too far.
I think that applying a timeline in this part of the agenda is not appropriate, given the fact that we do have a discussion about timing coming up. I do believe Mr. Ruggiero has spoken to that. I don't tend to agree with it, but that's where the scope is feels misaligned to me.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
So, because we've talked so much about specialized things, and those have been withdrawn, partially into what some have said, this covers what they're figuring. If this is approved, it would be my responsibility to follow through with identifying those in the highest need to return to school because they can't get meaningful remote education. And I'll be honest with you, I failed to see the parameters around that to be succinct enough or specific enough for me to carry out that task in a productive way.
Mr. Weaver's gone.
So I wanted to just clarify, since we're back to the original language. The original language is to identify students who are unable to receive any meaningful education remotely and report back to the school committee, et cetera, et cetera. To my mind, this is a instruction to identify the students who would have been categorized in cohort D under the original proposal. And I guess I would be curious if the administration had more specific guidelines in mind, but I think that identifying students who are unable to receive any meaningful education remotely is synonymous with the original construction of cohort D, as I understood it.
If I may, the original construction of cohort D were specific to high-need special education programs like functional life skills as an example.
Yep.
Students who would be attending LRTC in that model because that would be 4 days a week. And let's see.
Our ELL learners. who
Our
are new
language
learners.
learners. So those groupings were specific based on that high level of need. I don't know if we'd be looking for numbers and subgroups, but it's a really challenging thing to report out considering people's rights and privacy expectations. But
So can I ask what it would look like in two different scenarios? So if this were to pass and we have just those very narrow identified students, LRTC, ELL, yes. How does that interface with our sending schools and the other communities that we coordinate with? And how does I'll stop there.
It's a question about how this will impact well, as a region, we provide facilities and in return get subsidy for 6 schools in our region. If we become remote, we would be, in essence, either making an agreement to include that as a population, or we would be saying that we have another discussion or that our building is not available for that instruction to those other 5 school districts, not including us, but including us 6. I know that Director Callahan is here. I don't know if he'd like to speak to that question or if that would be appropriate at this time. But it would have a significant impact on our ability to program for students as a region.
Would you like to, Rob?
Should I come to the podium?
Yes, please.
While he's walking over there, I just want to make a quick comment. As someone who, for the majority of my life, fit into these groups that we singled out and then didn't single out and are still talking about one way or another, we need to remember that the more information we ask of a family about things that are highly personal and can be very difficult to talk about in the first place, the more of their dignity we're intentionally taking away. So we need to be very specific about whether we're doing that or not. And I know that's not the intention of it. I don't think anybody enjoys being asked how much money they make, especially when it comes to are you needy enough or not. So we need to try.
Cohort D added on to the original plan was still blended. Those kids could still blend in with the other students. And
Exactly.
now they're going to be very singled out with this proposal. Yes, Mr. Matthias-Collins?
Well, with respect, they may be singled out in the respect that they'll be going to school, but they'll be going to school with other students in the same cohort. And in the original proposal, they were still in a separate category of going to school 4 days a week when nobody else was. The reality is we have a responsibility to provide some sort of meaningful education to everybody. And I think most students are capable of receiving some sort of meaningful education remotely under these incredible, unprecedented circumstances, but I also recognize that there are some students in our population who just aren't. And rather than resign ourselves to the idea that some number of students will just get no education. I think it's important to identify the students who can't receive a remote education and give them the opportunity to return safely in person with the proper amount of distancing and precautions in using all of our facilities to serve a relatively small number of students. But part of the reason I wanted the administration to identify the students in terms of a number is that I really have no idea how large that cohort is. If it's, 70 students or if it's 700 students. I have no idea. And that's a meaningful piece of information in terms of the school committee's plans with regard to how they might be brought back and under what circumstances. So that's why I was asking the administration for a specific number and a specific plan to return them to in-person education safely. That's just some clarification.
Mr. Callahan?
Just so I'm clear, is there a specific question? I just want to make sure I'm
I
answering.
was asking how this current proposed model with the majority of students online, remote learning, and then the small subset of students previously identified as cohort D, attending school in person, how that works with the ascending schools and the other schools in our community that are doing in-person learning.
So, let me back up a little bit and just say that I think there are a couple important reasons that the LRTC programming was designated as part of cohort D. Part of it is that our students by nature prefer experiential, hands-on experience, and having the ability to be in person with a teacher and a cohort is powerful for them. I think another piece is the idea that a lot of our curriculum is state mandated, so that live work with a licensed professional in a clinical setting or in a live work setting is required so that they can receive the licensure and certification that they came to us for. That's also true of a lot of the dual enrollment that they do with the post-secondary. Our bridge-year students have a requirement in terms of the work they do in various programs. And then lastly, the work they do in the community as it relates to live work in terms of community service, but also in internships and cohorts. So having said that, I think that those were some of the reasons that we identified LRTC programming as part of cohort D. As it relates to the our region, it is a tricky matter for sure. That we have 6 schools that are essentially tied at the hip, 6 high schools, and what we have worked out is a scenario where we're going to bring back or hopefully bring back a group of students in a focused kind of way. I'll be honest and say that in a remote setting, that will be very difficult. That we have a certain amount of safety and code work that we can do, but most of our students don't come to us for safety and code work. So the idea that we have to pay particular attention to safety protocols and our ability to keep tools clean, keep students distanced. We have the luxury of larger shops, with open air settings in some cases. So again, those are the kind of plans that we've been building. I know that our high school partners at the other 5 sending schools are looking very much to this conversation because in most cases it's their intent to send students to do the live work that they registered for in the spring.
So students that are in an LRTC program, any LRTC program, they have their LRTC chunk of the day,
Right.
and then the rest of the day they're in a math class or an English class. So if the rest of the students aren't attending school, are we going to have teachers at the school? LRTC students are going 5 days a week. Are we going to have a teacher in a school teaching a math class to 3 LRTC students? Or how is that going to work if the majority of students aren't going to school?
Right. So one of the things that was proposed in the hybrid model was that there would be a sort of a narrowing of instructional objectives for students and teachers. So the idea that students in the first semester would be really only involved in their LRTC program. Those would be our second year technical students. Again, this is under the hybrid model. And then we would go to the first year tech students in the spring semester. That would basically allow them to focus on that tech program and then in the opposite semester on their academic work solely. It would also alleviate some movement issues around our various buildings so that the tech center didn't become sort of a place where things could be cross-pollinated and then transmitted back to other locations. And it also focused our teaching staff, both the high school and the technical staff on a more limited set of objectives for a given semester.
Okay, I think that answers my questions.
Okay.
I think it did, yes. Mr. Patrice Collins.
This is perhaps more clarification than anything. But I think that a lot of the questions surrounding both LRTC students and then obviously certain segments of the special ed and ELL populations in the way that they fit into the hybrid model was contingent upon the rest of the hybrid model. And so to some extent what my motion is requesting is that, given that the school committee has now rejected the hybrid model, that we ask the administration to come back to us with a plan for that group of students in cohort D that does not rely on the rest of the hybrid model, and to give you a chance to sort of reevaluate those students, how we can serve them, who they are, and come back to us with another plan. I mean, that's really all this third part is just a recognition that I think everybody in the school committee probably agrees that there are students who simply can't learn remotely, and that they were provided for under the original plan contingent upon lots of other parts of the plan. But that plan having been rejected, we now need a new plan for those students, and that's all I'm asking the administration to develop.
So I guess my question, because we heard from a student tonight who, maybe I'm overstepping, a couple of students tonight, who are not going to land in this high-need area, who spoke specifically about how the remote learning has not and does not work for them. I'm also worried about staff equity, how big this cohort is, and you would be asking one population of teachers to come to work and the rest of the group to not. I really worry about that from an equity standpoint. I'm also worried that if we start one way and then shift to another, and again, we can figure these things out, but we would be asking schools to build entirely new schedules. We'd be asking kids to change their teachers or shift from who they had before. So there's just a number of logistical concerns, but I agree that we need something to move forward with.
I'm going to let everybody, the people who haven't spoken as much, I'm going to let them speak first, and then we're going to do a vote.
Have some of these LL students already been identified for cohort D? Because I know usually, I guess an average of stats was there was basically over 1,000 that are ELL students, as well as over 1,000 that have IEPs. So has that already started been in place, and what's that look like?
Yeah, so students, when I speak of our ELL students who are our newest Mainers, are students, ELL students who are in our foundations classes or in our newcomer program at the middle school. It's a smaller population than the whole subset, the whole subgroup. Same thing for special ed. Those students, as we talked about in those specialized programs, and it may not be every student in a specialized program. So Jake has used FLF, functional life skills, as an example. It might not be every student in functional life skills. It would be students who, as a team, have been identified that need that the most, and would benefit from that the most. I think between our ELL and our special ed population that we were thinking about in cohort D, it's a fairly small number. I don't have a number to give you. I would be I'd be giving you misinformation. Honestly, I think the largest population within that cohort would be our LRTC students at this point, based on what we had looked at for the hybrid model in the cohort D, based within that hybrid model.
And the ELL students aren't exclusively in ELL classes. They also go into traditional classes and transition back and forth.
So the answer to that is yes and no. They're students who receive some of the core classes, reading, writing, math, in a setting with a group of students, but they do go out to those other classes. Savory spoke about computer science. Some students would go to her class. for unified arts and things like that. So yes, they aren't, it's not exclusive to that one teacher, that one classroom. There would need to be some interaction with other staff that may or may not be in the building.
Okay. Mr. Dana?
Just I guess one thing that I would be concerned about is potential for a concentration in a single building. What we were trying to do, I think, in the hybrid model was to ensure the fact that we could utilize as many buildings and as many classroom spaces to limit the concentration of students. If we go this other route, you could end up with a larger percentage of that identified group in one building, and so the only way to then separate them would be to spread them out across buildings they're not familiar with and where they're not really in district. And I think that just creates another whole logical nightmare as far as the busing and everything else. I don't see how that's going to work.
We'll vote. Ward 1,
No.
2,
No.
3,
Yes.
4,
No.
5,
No.
6,
No.
7,
Yes.
no. Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Yes. 3 yes, 6 no.
Motion fails. Mr. Majoros-Collins?
All right, let me try again. We'll take out the parts that folks have expressed concerns about. The motion will be to begin the school year with fully remote learning, full stop, end of motion.
Do we have a second?
What did he say?
We just go to remote learning exclusively, nothing else. Is there a second? There's no second. Ms. Hawkins?
Okay. This is getting annoying. I would suggest that, I don't even know how to say this, so this is going to be fun. We have identified remote learning as an option, maybe not our favorite, but an option. We have identified that we still have a lot of information, a lot of variables up in the air. It's like the worst math equation ever currently, because we have like 2 variables and the rest is like what? I would suggest that when or if the state gives us yellow-green, that we look at using the hybrid model.
We already have
Have
that.
that.
That's where we
Okay.
are.
Have that as an option, knowing that that's what we would do. If all these other variables came forward and gave us the information we need to know that's feasible.
Are you proposing this at a later date? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
So a delayed start?
a delayed start, as we're going to be discussing in
which is
just a
the next agenda
minute,
item.
but understanding that currently we have 2 options, which is completely remote learning, which we know doesn't work for everybody, and the hybrid model, which still isn't going to work for everybody at all, but it's an option. We need more information. Saying tonight we're all staying home and we're calling it good, that is not a good, there are no good answers here, but that's especially not a good answer for groups of people.
Can I propose that we possibly, I don't know if tabling is the right word, so correct me if I'm using the wrong word, suspend the rules, whatever we need to use for the right terminology, and address the start date, and then maybe that'll help clarify some things with this?
We would suspend the rules to take an item out of order.
My laptop died, so I don't have what I had in front of me anymore. So I don't know if that's an option, but if we address the time frame, maybe that'll help clarify some of the other details.
So you're making a motion to suspend the rules to act on agenda item number 5 out of order?
Correct. Yes.
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Wright?
I don't know that this solves the problem, and I get members of the public, members of this board are feeling very frustrated right now with this process. My suggestion would have been that someone who voted no on both proposals came up with a new proposal, since those were unsatisfactory and at two ends of the spectrum. But I will vote yes on this motion.
I think that the different proposals keep tying back to the time frame, and we don't have enough information, but we might have more information in 5 weeks. I think that keeps coming up, so maybe if we address the time frame, maybe that'll move us past that point, is what I'm hoping. Mr. Majerus-Collins.
I'll support the suspension of the rules, but I want to request that we do a 5-minute recess before we take up the next item.
Now?
We'll vote to suspend the rules to take up the next item, but then brief break. Is that okay?
It's at the
Okay.
chair's discretion.
The Ward 1.
To suspend the rules to take to the next item?
Yes.
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
That's right? Thank you, it's unanimous. And now we're taking a 5-minute break. We're going to stick to the 5 minutes. I think we went over 10 minutes on the last break. So let's How you hope?
Still on. You're good.
Are we good, Dave?
Yep.
We're live right now?
You're live.
Okay, thank you. So we are working on agenda item number 5, to receive and approve a revised 2020-2021 school calendar.
And so what you have in the packet is a modification of start date. And the way in which we arrived at that modified start date was to use or take workshop days that existed early in the year for the most part, and then moving them to the start of the year. And so what this allowed us to do is create more teacher prep time, create a later student start date, but accommodate the days missed from pushing the start by going to school on the prior identified workshop days. So in essence, it pulled 3 days bucket to the beginning of the year for workshop, moved the student 3 days scattered about when those workshop days were. And again, this was what I think an early attempt to try to meet some, I emphasize some of the need for our staff to get ready for things. Now, we drafted this calendar and kind of floated around and talked to a number of people about what their thoughts were on it, and we thought it was a reasonable compromise given the information we had at the time. Having said that, I think information has shifted, and I mean before tonight, because of different information coming out from the Department of Education and the timeframes for those things. So we have a proposed calendar in front of us that has 5 teacher prep days, and then students starting on August 31st. After further input and conversation, while I'm not making a motion, I would recommend or see if anybody wants to take on the motion of moving that date to either the 8th, which would be following Labor Day for a student start, or the 15th, which would be another full week. And so the implications of this, before we vote on that, I just need you to know in full, until we have a school waiver from the state of Maine, which we do not know if we will get, it puts us in a challenging situation to either break state law at the end of the school year or violate the teacher's contract and collective bargaining agreement.
Can I ask why the 15th and not the Monday of that week?
Sorry, the 14th.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Apologies.
Ms. Wright, sorry.
In terms of the second implication of moving the date back, breaking the teacher contract, what part does that break?
And so the teacher contract is for 182 work days.
Okay.
And so we'll either have kids attending beyond their 182 days, or we tell the kids to stay home and we break the state law. So that's the...
There's no world in which we just go, everyone's going to hang later into June?
That breaks the teacher's day.
Right.
Because the teachers would be starting sooner than the students.
So teachers would be working.
So,
One compromise to that could be to not start on the 24th, start on the 14th with students, wait a week to get more
but
information.
have teachers in for prep days in the time leading up to whichever
Correct.
started. Thank you.
So it's
Sorry,
still
that was
work days
unclear.
with teachers.
Okay.
Mr. Majoris Collins.
So I think I'm going to have a motion, but let me ask Superintendent Lima. You are saying that you're recommending either potentially September 8th as a start or September 14th as a start. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And with a full, clear-eyed understanding that without a waiver, we have a problem. And that it would seem like we would need to find a solution to that problem, but that's a solution that we would need to find by June. And right now, we're staring down the barrel of considerably sooner than that. So I guess I would go ahead and make a motion that we set the school start date on September 14th.
Second.
Give it there.
Kenya's on the delay. Is there a discussion? Mr. Donovan.
I did vote for the 14th, but what would you prefer? You said either or. I mean, I think more time is better, but why did you present it as or? Or do you have a preference personally?
My inclination is to say the 8th initially, But because of the pieces we don't have control over, it just seems appropriate to have a little more time. I know the staff would get themselves ready, and I know our leadership folks can get them ready. I don't want to lose student time, classroom time, education time. But I think if we start this process on the wrong foot, we leave teachers in the lurch, behind, unprepared, and it's not to their fault. It's due to a lack of information because of the pandemic. And I'm not blaming anyone here or in our central offices or staff. It's just the information for them. So my preference, if I could pick one, and I knew how some of this would play out, and I don't, I would initially think the 8th, because I also think that this committee could come back together and push again. I want to be mindful of families and their level of need for having kids home and what that looks like. My initial recommendation would, if I had to pick one, I would say the 8th, but I'm not opposed to the 14th. I think there's a lot of upsides to the 14th as well.
Thank you.
Do you know, are you aware, is Auburn going back on the 14th?
There's conversations in Auburn about changing their start date. I don't know what those conversations are, and I don't believe it's been presented to their school board yet. And I don't know if other people...
That's correct. They haven't presented anything to their school committee. There's talk about different options.
I'll just go down the line. Ms. Wright.
Great. I think affording our educators this opportunity, affording our administration this opportunity feels appropriate at this time. And we just keep hearing about wants versus needs. And I think we have a 5-member state delegation who we can make this case to. And hopefully they can help us with the DOE at the end of things. But again, the problem we need to fix now is safe reopening, if that's the method we're going to go. I also think, it was brought up during the previous agenda items, public comment period, about the influx of bodies into this community through the opening of Bates College August 25th through 27th. So we cleared the 2-week quarantine period by that point too, and we might have very different information or a clear understanding of the trajectory at that point. So I'm feeling more comfortable with that.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus-Collins.
Yeah, I suggested the 14th of the 2 dates the superintendent's line was threw out there for the same reason that Mr. Donovan said. It seems like more time is better. If we're going to do this, I would kind of like to only do it once. And just as an aside, I strongly encourage this committee not to place much, if any, value on the deliberations across the river just because they've been such a disaster. So that's my pitch for the 14th.
Mr. Putnam.
I'd like to hear from labor, since this is an issue that could impact labor. I'd like to hear their concerns, if they see any, if they're okay with that date. Allison, I don't know if you got anything on that.
September 14th is something that we've discussed just kind of in the air. I think that there is a real potential that regardless of the start of the year, at some point through the year, there will be a waiver by June, truly. The waiver form is available right on the state website and can be submitted by a school committee at any point. I don't see why the state, I'm not going to speak for the state, of course, but I don't see why the state would deny that request. From my perspective as president, I'm 100% on board with that, and I think that would get us into a much better situation where we're ready to either welcome students back remotely or in person.
Mr. Donovan, did you have any? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Keith.
I think the 14th is a good idea.
There was another reference, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Did you want to speak, Keith?
Could I?
Yes, sorry, I didn't see you.
Keith Levesque, LEA Vice President. To the point that Jake was making about the delay if the state doesn't approve reducing the number of student days, there is wording in the contract about teachers can be required, I think it's 5 days ahead of our normal start time and 5 days after the normal start time. So there is a possibility where the district could pay staff per diem on those additional work days, and some possibility to use some of the workshop days as regular student days.
And on that subject, can any of this CARES funding that we got that's like very strictly limited, could that be used to pay teachers for an extended period of time if we had to go beyond the contract?
It could be a conversation, but my initial thought would be no, because of how the funds have been spoken for to provide PPEs and things underneath the school, but also some term limitations of December 30th for the CRFs.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr.
Just a quick comment, the 14th is going to help the teachers help our students, so 14th is a good idea.
Kieran Choate, LEA Treasurer. I'm an Edtech at the high school. So the Edtech contract is 176 days, so it would be great for those of us in that capacity to know what the start date would be for that. Do we start on the 24th? Do we start on the 31st? Thank you.
So my initial thinking would be that as we grow our PD plan and start to put those pieces together, that we would have our Edtechs as scheduled. And there is a question on the Edtech start date because we were waiting on some decisions around PD prior to.
Mr. Damon.
Is there a structured plan right now for the PD, I mean, right now we don't know if we have the blended model. In fact, we know we just voted it down, so we're looking more at the remote model, I guess. Is the PD going to be primarily focused on that remote model almost exclusively?
So there were pieces of the PD plan that that are appropriate regardless of the plan that we would go with. Well, I shouldn't say regardless, whether it's hybrid or whether it would be remote. There are pieces of that. There are other pieces that might not be as wouldn't be necessary if we were going to go remote right away, because it would involve protocols within the building and the safety and all of those things, and those could change between the time we provide the training and the time that we return to buildings. So there are pieces of the plan that are going to need to happen regardless of what plan we move forward with, and there are other pieces that might need to be adjusted based on which plan.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but based on which plan we choose to propose, it could change not only the number of staff, but who the staff is that needs to be trained. If we decide it's fully remote, then we may have teachers that can't or won't. So how do we figure out who we're giving the professional development to without a plan going forward?
So I guess I would say that if we have teachers that are still employed as a teacher at Lewiston Public Schools, regardless of what their needs are in terms of their health or their preference, there are certain things, including our substitutes and other folks, that they would have to participate in. If they're choosing to take a leave of absence or something like that, then those teachers wouldn't necessarily be part of that.
And then we would have to make a concerted effort to replace them without necessarily knowing how many staff we need, because we don't have a plan moving forward of how many people are going to be in the building.
Sure. I think the goal is to have a plan tonight. I think we just took that out of order. So we're going to go back to that. Are you all set?
I agree with the 14th date. I think we need all the time we can for this PD, especially with an unknown population of who we are.
Ms. Whitlow?
What?
Did you have anything, did you want to comment?
I was like, ooh, I didn't think we were voting yet. I just want to say that we know that that the teachers and administrators need time. So not sure where the conversation's going because I can't really hear very well. But can we just get on to voting on this motion on the table?
Sounds like a move the question.
Yeah.
Ward 1? Oh. Oh. We can? It's 9:30.
Public input.
Were there any members of the public that wanted to speak on this, on the start date of the 14th? Are there still people in the other room? No? Okay. Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7?
Yes.
Yes? Ms.
Yes.
Rice? So now?
I throw something out there.
Yes.
Are we moving back to the item before? I'm gonna amend my further motion from before, so I'll make a motion that we start remote learning and every 4 weeks we look to evaluate to go hybrid. And look for a friendly amendment in regards to cohort D.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. I'm going to limit the discussion to one time per person now in an effort to try to conserve time.
I'd like to ask a clarifying question, potentially have an amendment. Mr. Physick, this would be a remote learning start on the previously identified and agreed upon date of September 14th.
Yes.
With a requirement that the school committee reevaluate that every 4 weeks. Fine. And then you said you wanted a friendly amendment to, and I would suggest that perhaps the friendly amendment could be to instruct the school administration to come back to us with a plan for safe in-person education for the previously identified cohort D.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. I'll support that.
Discussion, anyone else?
Just one more time, sorry.
Okay, so I think actually technically Mr. Damon has to agree to my friendly amendment as well.
Yes.
But the friendly amendment is just to ask the administration to come back to us with a plan to conduct safe in-person education for the previously identified members of cohort D. As quickly as possible, but obviously we can't implement a plan until we see one and approve it.
Chair, for accuracy. So there's a motion that has been seconded that we start with students 9/14 as a remote approach, and we assess every 4 weeks with a friendly amendment. That admin get information, come back with a plan to safely educate the students in cohort D.
Safe in-person education for
In person.
yeah.
In person. Gotcha.
And the idea would be that we would receive that plan and approve it, or I guess not, but hopefully approve it as quickly as you can develop it.
Can I ask a clarifying question? That's 4 weeks away, 5 weeks away. In that time, we'll be able to compile a lot of information. I'm unsure why we would want to commit to strictly remote learning at this point when a lot of the concerns with the blended model or the online learning were about not having enough information, not having enough time to prepare, all of that stuff. So the point of delaying the school was to give us the time to prepare. So I'm not sure why we would delay the start and then go to remote learning. If we're going to just go to strictly remote learning, why wouldn't we keep it at the start where it is now? I'm just, since you made the motion, I'm just asking you to clarify the thought.
So the thought process is almost like hopefully a phased process that hopefully we come up with a plan that the cohort D could go first, we phase them in, and then hopefully that we get all the answers that we need. And some of the other protocols in place, and then we keep evaluating that we're looking to go to the hybrid model.
Can I suggest a friendly amendment? That we, and I don't know how this would work with professional development since they're really two different things, but that we plan for school to start on the 14th with the information that we gather between now and then for what's most appropriate, whether it be the hybrid model or the remote model.
Say that again.
The information that we gather between now and the 14th, we would use to decide as we get closer to that time which is more appropriate, the hybrid model or the remote model. So that there's the possibility that starting on the 14th, if things look great between now and then and we've got this in place and all the concerns have been addressed, or most of the concerns have been addressed that we didn't have the time for, we've got more information that we could start with the hybrid model on the 14th.
I don't have a problem with it.
Bruce?
Well, my only question, I guess, there was if we're going to do that, would we want to start the cohort D on the 14th as an in-person, where we're already concerned about their ability to do the remote?
I think either way, cohort D would start on the 14th regardless.
Start the rest of the kids in remote, and that cohort D be able to start in person.
So I think to clarify what she's saying, when we have all this information and we come back, and if everything looks good, why wouldn't we just start hybrid model then? And I think some of the concerns of the board, and I don't want to, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like, we're phasing in a little bit. I think that was some of the concerns, so we kind of phase in with kind of a very small group, and then branching off the protocols and branching off how the small group does in terms of being around each other and all that stuff. Then we would look to go to hybrid after that. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's what it sounds like.
We just voted down a motion to start remotely with some sort of mechanism for cohort D on August 31st. And now we're voting for the exact same thing, but 2 weeks later.
We're kind of not, because there's a lot of specific language on terms of who would get cohort D with. This is kind of going, what's the framework going to look like? And correct me if I'm wrong, Joyce Collins.
So I see the proposed friendly amendment, which I'm still unclear has or has not been accepted. But I just see the friendly amendment as just kicking this entire question to a later meeting. That's which if that's what the board wants to do, I mean, but I do sort of, we did vote down a proposal to start remote with a direction to the administration to identify the students who are in need, likely the students previously identified as cohort D, and come back to us with a plan to evaluate them. And I don't think that Chair Parks is wrong in the sense that what we're now considering is the exact same proposal, but
2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, which I'm also fine to vote for. I mean, I think we should start remote, but, I see the point.
Yes.
I hate to kick the can down the road, but I'm also wondering if we could have answered some of those pretty critical questions tonight. I don't want to know, and don't dare to propose that you said. Would the original motion have been carried by vote? I know different people feel different ways, but I'm just curious. If we could have answered the question about the bus, and we could have answered the question about the exact numbers, and we knew more information about the staffing, and we had it nailed down with the kids, and we had the latest guidelines from the Department of Education. I guess what I'm wondering is, to Megan's point, and I can't make amendments per se, but is it worth returning on the 24th, instructing administration to still find out this information, and certainly we're going to move forward with PD to be ready for remote and hybrid. We have to do that regardless, because if this pops up in December and the emergency order is lifted and the DOE says everybody's back to school, again, I'm not saying I predict that by any stretch, but we would have to be prepared for those moments. And so, would it be worth revisiting this on the 24th, hopefully with many more answers to those questions? If we don't have them, we're having the same conversation. If we do have them, we might have a different conversation. conversation. But we've still extended the preparation time and time to get more information in.
Mrs. Hawkins?
The way I'm looking at it,
Mr. Paltman, I guess?
sorry,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
What I was gonna say is, I know this sounds like 2 extra weeks for no reason, but to my mind, that gives us time to get this influx of Bay students, which we are going to have, see what the fallout from that could potentially be, and then slowly step into going back to school. My biggest fear is that we just jump right into huge groups of kids at school. And yes, we'll be doing the PD training and whatnot, but we also need time to get parents up to date, get students up to date. I don't see 2 more weeks as being that much of a huge ask. The only thing we are going to need is some support if we don't get the waiver from the state, from our teachers and LEA and whatnot. When voters come to us and say, we're not giving you more money to pay teachers overtime, we're not going to pay for their per diem, because there are going to be people who say that. We've seen budget fights over pathetic things before.
But and we didn't agree to per diem in our conversations, but I thought it was good that Vice President was for making us aware that that provision does exist in the contract should we choose to go that way.
Mr. Winters-Collins?
So to some extent, I think that Mr. Physic's motion of regular reevaluations is reasonable, but I really would like this committee to have a default answer for the community, and it sounds like we're not in a place to be able to say that that answer is hybrid, and perhaps down the line other committee members will be persuaded and that vote would go differently. I'm really skeptical that I'll be persuaded unless pandemic circumstances change. But I like the fact that Mr. Physic's motion provides some sense of clarity that in the absence of any change, students are going to be returning to school for remote learning on September 14th, and that way at least folks have an understanding that that's happening. And then obviously if we can get people back, or if the majority of the committee wants to bring people back in a more aggressive way, that's their prerogative at a later date.
Clarification,
Yes.
did you guys accept her friendly amendment to go hybrid on September 14th?
Oh, as far as,
Well, you proposed going remote, and then she jumped in and added a friendly amendment to go hybrid.
if everything fell in line, I don't see anything is wrong with that.
And you agree?
I doubt it.
Clarifying question.
Oh,
Well, I've talked a lot, so.
So my initial perception of the motion made by Mr. Physic and seconded by Mr. Damon was that we are starting again September 14th. The reason why we pushed the date back is to give teachers and administrators more time to build out both remote and hybrid plans for whenever those might happen. One of the arguments when we were speaking about the waiver was we had a superintendent on leave, and Superintendent English is newer to this position, and no one has made a decision yet. And so now the decision has come down to us, and folks are asking for more time, so we're affording them more time. I would not support a motion that moves us forward towards hybrid on the 14th. I would support a motion that moves us forward towards remote on the 14th, because we are giving the time to those who need to plan. I don't see it as, yeah, whatever happens on the 14th as acceptable for my vote.
Just as a point of order question, so Sparks did offer the friendly amendment to start hybrid on the 14th. I don't know if it was in the right order, but I thought I heard you both say yes, and then I heard questions, so I don't know where we're at as far as my notes.
So what Member Reg has transpired and said, and I'm assuming it's going to be something like some of the other school committee members, all reject her friendly.
Well, it's not up to us to reject it or not.
I see.
It's you and Mr. Damon because it's your motion, but I'm going to go from voting yes to voting no.
What he's saying is he will vote yes to go, starting school on the 14th, remotely only. If you both accept the friendly amendment to add in the possibility of starting hybrid on the 14th, he will then change his vote to no. That's what he's saying.
So and what I'm saying is, I'm rejecting her friendly amendment.
So it's
What
ridiculous.
this will do is this would move us to
This goes back to the original conversation that,
remote only and to
With cohort D.
basically
It's basically just the original motion.
reevaluate. What are the dates of the school committee meetings?
next scheduled meeting is the 24th of August.
24th, which is the first day of PD,
Yes.
and then it would be,
14th.
the 14th would be the first day of
Yes,
school.
because Labor Day is the
again.
8th.
Okay, I'll go along with Elgin on this. We're just,
Is there any other discussion? I would like to suggest that this doesn't clarify what will happen if we're bringing the cohort D students back. It doesn't clarify how they're going to interface with the rest of the school. There won't be other students in the school, so they'll be part of their day in the ELL students. They'll be part of their day in their ELL or LRTC program, and then they'll have to have teachers that aren't going to be there because they're going to be at home teaching remotely. It just seems very not doable. I know I'm not saying this right anymore, my brain has shut off, but it just seems like we're creating an issue if we do that.
So just from my notes, what I have is the motion is to start the 14th remote and assess every 4 weeks was the original motion. With a friendly amendment that admin come back with a plan to safely educate the students in cohort D in person. And that was when we first asked when the next meeting was of the 24th. So I don't know if that resolves some of that concern. Still leaves it pretty open to the 24th, but it could be acted upon that meeting.
What could be acted on?
Cohort D.
so you're proposing to make an agenda item out of discussion of cohort D on the 24th?
Sounds good to me.
Mr. Majorsky.
So my entire perspective on this, and I think that the administration came to us with a plan to educate the students in cohort D in person that was contingent upon the rest of the hybrid plan. The school committee has rejected the hybrid plan. But we would still like to educate those students in person, so now we need a new plan from the administration. And perhaps we can see it on the 24th. Hope so, but obviously, when you get to it, you get to it, and when it's ready, it's ready. But that's, I guess, my perspective that lots of the questions that Chair Parks just raised are appropriately questions that should be raised around whatever plan the administration comes to us with around educating those students in cohort D. But we don't have that plan yet. So hopefully we'll have one, and hopefully it answers those questions.
Ms. Wright?
Just remind us all that everyone keeps saying no plan is perfect, and if this gets us to a majority vote, then that's what we move forward with.
Is there any other discussion? Ward 1?
Yes.
2?
We're doing public comment.
Oh,
Oops.
sorry, we probably should do public comment.
We reopened it, so.
Yes.
So just to reiterate, LEA stands behind the hybrid plan. We just felt more information was needed to really finalize what that plan was. My understanding is the vote tonight was the hybrid plan as proposed at this time. If we have the additional time, that is exactly what we asked for. We appreciate that. And if the district is in a position by that time where all of our concerns have been met, then I don't see that there'll be an issue returning as hybrid. Just to clarify.
Thank you.
When I listened to the discussion as to what led to the vote against hybrid, much of the concern was wanting information. and concern on access to devices and internet. Remote learning is certainly going to be harder if there's a less access, if we don't have access to devices and internet, so it's not going to be easier. And if this time, because of the vote to delay the start, provides us with more information, I do not understand a refusal to look at hybrid at that time. My son, who is in 8th grade, I haven't been texting him or, he hasn't been in my mind, but he is watching apparently online, and he just texted that he does not want fully remote learning. Why can't they listen to this student, which he's only one student, I realize, and do the 2-day thing? Much testimony here tonight via email and in person was asking you to support hybrid, the people that you serve. I think that what I'm seeing is more a refusal to look at hybrid as opposed to really looking for what's best. And are you going to trust the plan that the administration brings back about cohort D, because you did not trust the plan that they brought to you for tonight?
Keith Levesque, LEA Vice President. So I guess we as LEA have agreed with much of what the board is saying about there being a lot of gaps in information, thus the need for pushing back the start date. So we appreciate that you're willing to do that. I hope you're also willing to look at the data that is brought forward. So if the board decides to go, we need a plan, right? I think that's the point. So if the board decides to go with a virtual plan at this time, I hope that you're able to consider a hybrid plan on your next meeting on the 24th. To put it into perspective, we are right now exactly 3 weeks away from what the proposed start date was for students. The 24th will also be exactly 3 weeks away from what you just voted as the new start date for students. So that will still be adequate time for us to prepare as educators and for parents. I mean, we wish there was more time, but this is what it is. But that will still be the 3 week time that we were currently under at the beginning of this meeting for changes to be put into place and plans to be put into place for staff and for parents. Thank you.
So another discussion that I hear coming up is the Bates students returning. So I have a daughter that's returning to college on Friday. They are being tested upon entry to the campus and then 2 weeks later, as is Bates College students. So you will know if any of those students are testing positive. Why can't we look to do that for our Lewiston school students? I would have my kid tested. It's a very simple nasal test. You don't have to do the nasal pharyngeal test, but that would give us answers, right? That would calm fears, and that would provide data of who has it. And granted, it's a point in time, but at that point, when you're starting, they're all negative, and you've identified those that are positive, and you can go forward from there. But to just keep delaying, I can't support that.
I know everybody's tired. It's been a very long meeting. I think you guys need to really think about how hard it is to learn remotely. And if you have teachers that are saying that they needed more time and you're willing to give it and that's how they prefer to teach, then you need to really listen to them. My daughter was one of the ones that spoke tonight. She has never failed anything. She took an online class with a seasoned teacher that I've known for years at the high school. My son had a fantastic teacher. We're so lucky to have her. She did a fantastic job teaching online. She failed 2 of her tests. She is like number 7 in her class. She doesn't fail anything. And she listened to all the videos, and she took notes, and the teacher had handouts, and they followed along. And very, very attentive teacher, very small class. That teacher checked her email twice a day. There was any question, she answered it. But remote learning is hard. It's very, very hard. My son didn't continue on for a bachelor's degree because he is assuming that eventually they will go remote, and he won't. It's hard, and it's not worth it to him. So he's holding off. So you just really need to know that for a lot of students, online is very, very hard. Thank you.
Jennifer Williams, 119 Dow Avenue again. I admit I got confused with a lot of the discussion and the motions and the amendments and the seconds and the rules of order. But what I took out of most of your discussion earlier tonight about the hybrid model and it not passing was a big concern for lack of data. And if you have now extended the start of school to September 14th, wonderful, it gives more time for that data. Why would you not want to get that data, reevaluate, like was mentioned, when you have a meeting again on the 24th? That still gives parents time. Yes, I'm sure parents would wanted to know tonight what's happening, but knowing that it's 2 weeks later, if it takes another 2 weeks for a more informed decision by this committee because you have time to get more data, that still gives parents 3 weeks to kind of plan and figure out what's going on. I feel like if you want that data, why not wait and get it and use it to make a more informed decision rather than say you want the data, but now you're going ahead and making a decision to delay and go remote regardless of it. Thank you.
Public comment. Before we vote, I would just like to say that I strongly encourage the school committee to consider the originally proposed plan for the delayed September 14th start date, or to consider not making a decision tonight and revisiting this on the 24th at our next meeting.
Chair,
Yes?
question and amendment. Question, Jake, how's our school year separated again by semesters? What is the date of the start of a semester, the end of the semester?
So it's broken down differently at different levels. So at the high school level, it's broken down by semester, so it's half year. Mid-January, give or take, is the split. Those are separated by quarters that are roughly 9 weeks long. At the elementary level, they operate off of trimesters, and those are...
The first one ends around Thanksgiving.
So it's the third of the year. I guess I would note internally that we can flex those to what we have available to us.
I'd like to make an amendment to start September 14th with the hybrid model, with a review after each semester to see the progress of the district, and that if we need to revert back to remote, we can do at that point. I think going every 4 weeks, it's in the middle of the school semester. You're juggling a lot as it is, and then adding something like this, maybe at the end of the semester, it's a little more cohesive. And I think there's enough information now that I'm comfortable. You asked the question. Yes, it would make a difference to me if I had all that information about transportation, the technology, all this, and we knew where we stood. So I'm thinking that extra 3 weeks, I think, makes a big difference. I'm going to be optimistic. I think we have the agreement of everybody in the room at this point that I think we can do this starting September 14th with the hybrid and reviewing it in a proper fashion after each semester if we need to make a change. So that's my amendment.
You need to accept. I mean, you don't need to accept it. You need to either accept or not accept.
I accept it.
I'll accept. I'll continue to second it.
So the current motion is to start on the 14th, hybrid, start on the 14th, hybrid, and review at, can I use the term like grading breaks? Because I don't have specific dates.
Whatever works for you guys. That's my concern going forward.
My question on that is, with the state reviewing every 2 weeks, if we're not scheduled to revisit it until the end of the semester, term, whatever, and the state bumps us to a yellow or red, then what? Then we automatically revert to online no matter what, right?
I don't know if the review language is necessary given this body's
Right.
ability to do that on a regular basis anyway.
I agree.
But that would be, they would have to agree.
Well, I'm looking at our own internal mechanism, not the state. That maybe we're seeing things just too rocky, we're getting too many complaints, that it's not working, there's a lot of things that still need fixing. State can be sitting green, but we may still have processes or pieces missing that are becoming problematic, and we be able to make that adjustment
Wouldn't we want to
ourselves.
address those issues sooner, not wait till the end of the semester to address them?
We can do it sooner.
Right, so that's the point. We have the mechanism to do it at any time, so why do we have the end of the semester as the time frame?
Because I think there's a folly if halfway through a semester, we have to ask teachers and students to adjust their learning on something. All of a sudden we're asking them to divert from in-person to jumping back to online. And as we found out, the online takes some prep time and so forth. I'm just trying to,
They'll already be doing it online though, part of the week. Because they'll be doing the hybrid model, which is partially online and partially in person. So they'll already be prepared for that and well into that. So if something's going wrong, we would want to address it immediately. We wouldn't want to say, hey, we know something's going wrong right now, but we decided we weren't going to address it till the end of the semester. That kind of seems silly.
all right. I'll scratch that.
So the friendly amendment would be to start 9/14 hybrid.
I accept it.
And okay, Bruce, you second.
Move the vote.
I have a couple of comments in public. I don't know if you want to, they just popped up.
Okay.
Okay, 2 emails here just from the last few minutes. My name is Amy Burley. I'm a teacher at Parent Lewiston. I don't know what else to say except we are listening to constituents. We have shared that we want to go to hybrid learning. If we have extra time to prepare for in-person learning, I feel we should give it a try. I wish you would please consider the plan. And the next one is Travis Burley has 2 daughters at 10 Lewiston elementary schools. I feel you would not listen to parents. Other counties are going back to school with no COVID cases. Daycares have been open in our state all summer. No COVID outbreaks have been reported. Please consider the hybrid model again. We aren't going all in with this model. It's a start, and we can reevaluate every couple of weeks with the state.
Mr. Majoros-Collins.
So now that we're back to discussing the hybrid model, I have to return to my original public health concerns that we cannot vote for a model unless we can look our students and our staff in the eye and say for sure that they don't have, that they are not going to contract a deadly disease by returning to school. And the same reasons that we heard earlier for rejecting this and the lack of information continue to be the case. I don't understand why we would vote for something contingent upon, that we just rejected because we didn't have enough information without getting more information. I was prepared to support Mr. Fizik's original motion to go back remote with the possibility that if we got the more information, we could adjust that. I can't, in good conscience, vote for a hybrid model in the absence of solid evidence that it's going to be safe. And we don't have that tonight.
I don't think we ever will.
Call the
Ms.
vote.
Ray? Oh, there's a hand raised. Sorry, Ron.
Can you repeat the question before? My arguments are the same. I did want to address a public comment that was made, which is a very salient one. If we had universal testing, this would be a really different conversation because there's a level of security afforded by that. But that has not been any part of the discussion. And it's a critical part of the strategy, so.
If I may, the initial sense that I have, and I don't know if Assistant Superintendent Paquette or Chief Officer, if you have any input, but my initial sense is that we as a public school institution do not have the authority to require that test for students to access their education.
Ward 1?
Repeat the motion that we're actually on.
The motion to be voted on is to start school September 14th using a hybrid model. But there was still a friendly amendment for admin to come back with a plan to safely educate the students in cohort D in person.
That was tied to the original
Right.
motion.
Ron had made an amendment to.
So cohort D was tied to if we were doing strictly remote. So if that's not the proposal anymore, does that eliminate the need for admin to, admin doesn't need to create a plan for cohort D because that's already part of the original model.
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
No.
4,
No.
5,
No.
6,
Yes?
7,
No.
yes, Ms. Ray?
No.
I know this is going to make people angry, but I think we need to revisit this on the 24th when we have more information and can make an actual decision.
Is it a motion?
Motion fails 4-5.
Mr. Majoros-Collins?
I would like to make a motion consistent with Mr. Physick's original motion to start remote learning on September 14th with regular, I might even say bi-weekly check-ins with the administration and to instruct the administration to develop a plan for the students in cohort D to receive safe in-person education. Is there a second?
Second.
So I have something to say about that. Now, so it's not safe for, most people to go back to school, but it is safe for cohort D. I'm so confused here, and no matter what we're doing, we have to realize there is a pandemic here. This whole 80% of people want to go back to school with the surveys, but if we vote to go back to school right now, we're going to end up going remote anyways. It's inevitable there's going to be an outbreak within the school system, in the community, even more than what it is already. We already know that last meeting we had, 33% of people being tested were positive. Now, I'm not voting for in-person school. My kids are not going back to school. So whatever we do as a board, that's great, but I'm not voting for any in-person anywhere, and I'm not doing, some people can go and some people can't.
Ms. Ray?
So I was initially supportive of Mr. Physick's original motion because it included the scaling up of this effort and also afforded time to educators and administration to apply that plan, see how it goes, and then bring other folks back, maybe adding cohort A for 4 weeks and cohort B in the next 4 weeks. As a member of the public very thoughtfully noted earlier, this is about needs, not wants, and I want nothing more than to get a successful vote through right now, but that's obviously not happening 4 votes deep on this. I that is the data that I want to see. I want to see successful implementation with the due time that our educators deserve to make that happen, is why I will support this motion as it is, but who knows what else is in store in this discussion.
Mr. Medeiros-Collins.
I want to address this, I guess I can't. In response to Ms. Whitlow's concerns, which I absolutely share, I want to emphasize that my motion only instructs the administration to bring us back a plan to educate those students safely. We would still be reviewing that plan, we would still be evaluating that plan to see whether or not it was safe, and we would have the opportunity to turn it down. In the absence of any further action by the school committee, this would commit us to fully remote learning. It's just an opportunity to see if the administration can find a way to educate our most at-risk and most in-need students safely. And I want to give them a chance to develop that plan, but I'm not saying I'd vote for their plan, and certainly you wouldn't have to either. That's my pitch to Ms. Whitlow.
Mr. Elton,
That's
go ahead.
That's all right, it's 10 o'clock at night. So again, my original vote was for the hybrid plan, and again, my vote for the hybrid plan. My compromise was to come with the motion to do remote learning with the cohort D. And I've heard the teachers, and I see their point of view is they, obviously, it sounds like they want hybrid. So I just want to put that on the table.
Mr. Damon? Did you have another? No. Ms. Hawkins?
I just want to say, and this is probably completely off the subject, but wishful thinking that COVID isn't going to happen here is what got Georgia and Texas and California into the positions they're in right now. I understand people want their kids back in school, and there are many reasons for that, not the least of them being economic, but also learning. What we need to understand is this pandemic isn't just affecting here. It's the entire world. Our children are not going to fall that far behind the rest of the kids in the world. We're all behind right now. Yes, we need to mitigate that as much as we can, which is where hybrid can help, but it's not going to fix it. We're not suddenly, next week, they're going to be up to date with everybody. This is a whole generation of people who are going to be a little bit behind where they might have been. And we just have to accept that, because that's not going to change tomorrow. What we have to do is look at how we're going to do this responsibly. I would like to see a slow phasing in of hybrid. Not a jump in, not use kids who can't learn outside of a school day used as guinea pigs, because that's, you know, what people could say looking at that idea of just having the cohort D go. But we need to do this methodically and with thought and planning. I would, if it were possible, I would say let's table this until the 24th when we have more information and revisit and decide then.
I think that would be a great idea, except I think that there's people in this room who have made up their minds 100%, and no matter what data we get, and no matter what information we get, and it doesn't matter if we push it out 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, they're going to vote the same way because they've made up their mind. And so I don't know that that's going to change. I think that the methodical planning, the pieces that matter, the attention to detail, all of the stuff that you say is very important in protecting our students, I think that work has been done, and that's how we came up with the hybrid plan. And I think the majority of the teachers, the majority of the parents, the majority of the most impacted people by this want the hybrid model. And those are the people that vote for us and put us in these seats. And we're not in these seats to say, this is what I think is best. We're in these seats to do what our constituents, our teachers, our students, and our parents want. And sitting here pig-headed saying, I don't want to vote this way, and it doesn't matter what information you give me, I'm still not voting that way, is not what we're here for. And I think that we've wasted a lot of people's time, and we keep bringing up the same motions, and they keep failing, and this is going nowhere. So I think some people either need to give a little bit of compromise, or, and I'm not saying compromising students' health, which I think might be a comeback to that, but I think we need to make some headway on this. And just having the same conversation over and over again isn't getting us anywhere. Mr. Donovan.
I'd like to pretty much repeat, we've discussed, it seems our discussion has been very repetitive. I'd like to call the question.
Would you like to repeat the motion?
The motion on the table is to start 9/14 remote and instruct admin to come back with a plan to safely educate the students in person in cohort D.
Cohort D exclusively?
It's just a plan that we're receiving. We can reject the plan. It's just an instruction to develop.
That does it, yeah. As well, what about if we phase in, like kindergarten, first and second grade going in for a week? And then
If
bring
we
in
do
them.
any one segment of students and not them all, then those are going to be the guinea pig students, and that's not going to fly with people.
I want
I'm just trying to
to
work
point
with
that
the
the motion, the question's been called.
I never finished what I was saying. Again, there's a lot of stuff on the table, and again, the teachers say they want hybrid, like some of us want hybrid, and again, I'm trying to work in the frame system of trying to come up with a compromise that maybe we can sway some of the other members who are against the hybrid. So,
If we get to the question, we have it this way.
So the member calling the question has precedence, unfortunately. I understand what you're trying to do, for sure.
Yeah, no, if we could get to the question, I have another motion.
Ward one.
After we vote.
We're voting on strictly online starting September 14th with a plan to be put in place for cohort D.
hang on a second, so does he have something to add to this?
No, he's just calling the vote.
Okay,
No.
2,
no.
3,
Yes.
4,
No.
5,
No.
6,
Yes.
7.
No.
No. Ms. Wright?
Yes.
It needs a simple majority to pass, correct?
I'm sorry?
We need a simple majority to pass, is correct?
Yes.
We need
Our last
5
vote
members.
on the hybrid was 4 or 5, no, correct?
Correct. We
I'd
need
like to
5.
make- I would like to make a motion to accept the hybrid plan effective September 14th with us reevaluating the situation every 2 weeks. And obviously, if something goes wrong, we're going to shut it down immediately. There's no question about that, but we need to at least give it a chance.
Second.
Ms. Wright?
I just want to publicly state that I am a person who's not moving on the hybrid model, and that is because I honestly could not live with myself if someone becomes seriously ill or suffers the most unfortunate consequence from this process. And so I am not moving my vote on hybrid learning at this point in time. And, you know, that can be pig-headed or that can be not respecting constituents, but again, they did put us in these seats, and I'm making that choice, and I will stand behind that choice any day of the week.
Mr. Majoros-Golin?
I agree with Ms. Wright, and I find it, frankly, a little bit inappropriate that the chair would make comments to that effect. I think that we all have to assume that everyone's acting in good faith, everyone is acting in what they believe is the best interest of the school community. I would say that folks on the side of this that are in opposition to hybrid have never questioned the motivations of folks who want to see that pass. And frankly, I think that the chair owes some members an apology.
Thank you for your opinion. Does anyone else have a comment? Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
No.
4,
No.
5,
No.
6,
Yes.
7.
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Wright?
No.
Motion passes 5-4.
So students, just to recap, students will return to school on September 14th under a hybrid model, and we will reevaluate every 2 weeks whether or not we stay hybrid or return to remote learning, and teachers and Edtechs start on August 24th. Thank you. Agenda item number 6, to receive and approve the interim superintendent's contract.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7.
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Agenda item number 7, report from the city council representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've had a couple meetings, nothing is terribly germane to the school committee, so I'll keep it brief. We have been seeing the phase 2 of the design plan from Planning and Code. I will be making a recommendation when that comes through the planning board and through the council for approval, that they also check in with the facilities subcommittee, as I believe some of the design plans may impact future school building.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8, report from the school committee chair. The only update I have is that Jake and I are working on a plan to address the school resource officer subject that was rescheduled last month, and that we will be following up on that in the very near future. Agenda item number 9 is to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes?
7,
Yes.
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 Thank you.